But I'm so pleased today to be joined by Chesapeake Gold's CEO, John Paul Tsotsos, for what I hope to be a great interview. So good to see you, JP.
Yeah, thanks, Romeo. I'm happy to be here and share a little bit more background about me and continue to talk more about Chesapeake as well.
Yeah, awesome. I know, and I like to lead with this question because we do have a lot of geologists, but also just industry enthusiasts who are watching. So I'd love to know if you could tell us why you decided to get into geology as a career.
Yeah, so as a child, and this kind of dates me, when Science North opened up in Sudbury, I think I was actually there on the first day. And there's a picture of me with a little raincoat on. I went down into their little mock-up mine. Got really interested in mining and geology, um, and that kind of sat with me as a little kid. But as I got older, like most kids, they want to have those jobs where you be a lawyer, or my focus was on being a dentist actually. And I went into university thinking I'm going to be a dentist. But in high school, I really had a passion for the geography course that I took, which turns out to actually be geology. And I had a great professor there in high school. I loved geology, or what was geology, what they called geography. And when I got to university, I took geography thinking I'm going to get the same thing, as well as a whole bunch of sciences to get into dentistry. And the geography ended up being real geography, which is demographics, nation states, understanding populations of different countries, and understanding the what shapes the country, both what's it surrounded by, like water wise, and their reserves in oil and that. And it wasn't only until later that I found out that geology is actually what I was interested in, and I found the earth science department. And then I realized that my passion always lied there. I always loved rocks and minerals and mineral processing and understanding metamorphic, igneous, and sedimentary rocks and how they change, but also how mineral deposits are formed and how they're concentrated. And as time went on, I got to know people in the industry, and I'm sure Romeo can attest to this. Our industry is a fun industry. There's lots of great people in it. And I got a passion for geology, and it was a no-brainer when I was asked to do a master's in geology in my final year. And so I did that for 2 years at the University of Toronto. And then I've been in the industry ever since. I haven't left the industry, and I've been lucky enough to be employed throughout it, and work with really great teams. So it's not very often. A lot of people say they get to work in their passion and what they're excited about. But I've been fortunate enough to go on adventures like Indiana Jones, traveling into the Amazon rainforest, looking for mineral deposits, flying in helicopters in northern Quebec, as well as in BC. And all of those things, obviously, as a child, that's really exciting, and I'm very happy to be a part of our industry.
It's a rare privilege to be able to actually make money off your passion. I don't think many people get to, so that's cool. And I know we kind of got into your education a bit, but you ultimately got an MBA in, as I understand, natural resources, energy, and environment.
Yeah.
Curious, was your goal to be in the field, or was it the corporate side, which now you're sort of combination, more really your
Yeah.
passion?
Yeah, so I had a wonderful professor in university, one of my mentors, Larry Smith. And some people know him as Lawrence Devon Smith. And he's been involved in the CIM. And I was very fortunate one day to be at the CIM, and we started chatting. And we happened to live on the same side of Toronto, and we took the subway together, and it really struck up a relationship. I took a course that normally engineers were the only ones that are allowed to take this. It was basically mineral economics course. And that was, the beginning of my passion for the whole finance side of the business, understanding projects, the capital costs, the operating costs, looking at the revenues, looking at, what are the inputs when it comes to the material being mined, the grades, what's the stripping ratio, and understanding all of that. And that really drove me to decide I really need to understand the basics of the exploration industry and the basics of the mining industry. And so that was my first job, Beartooth Platinum, working at a really great exploration project in Montana, and then working at Royal Nickel, which we did a PEA, PFS feasibility study and IPO'd the company, and that really solidified putting those inputs into the different parts of the model, and then understanding the economics of it. That really solidified that part of where I wanted to go. So the MBA was the perfect opportunity to switch from being a technical guy with technical experience over to someone with financial experience. And I used my MBA to basically join capital markets at BMO and work with the research team there.
Yeah, actually, that's right. The next thing I wanted to ask about is what really, I mean, in the equity research group there at BMO, what did you learn most from that position? How does it contribute to what you do today?
Yeah. We had 27 companies under coverage when I was there. So it's a big, group of companies, lots of different strategies the companies are putting forth, lots of different teams. And working at BMO, put on a hat that where, you look at everything analytically and you understand, what's an economic project, what is good drilling, or what is good strategic decisions by management team. And the whole time you're sitting in that seat, you're trying to figure out what the strategy is for the management teams. And that was really exciting to me. That was one of the things that I took away. The teams that work best together are the ones that succeeded. Not necessarily what the project is. The project's very important, but if you have a good team, they could always find solutions for projects that are a bit more challenged. And then they also know when to pivot when they need to go to a project that's better. And so having a good team and having really smart people is one of the things that I learned. Another aspect of the business I learned was networking. Met a whole bunch of investors, institutional investors, retail investors, other people that work in the capital markets, investment banking, sales and trading, and research. And that's all key clients and key people that I know in my network that have helped me excel later on in my career.
No, it's always good not to underestimate networking, especially in this industry where it's global, but also smaller, I think, than
Yeah.
I think. One more question before we start zooming in on Chesapeake. Really curious, and I think our audience is interested too, because a lot of them don't know, is what does a corporate development team focus on? And how do those skills really help you as your current role as CEO of Chesapeake?
Yeah. So you'll notice I was talking about strategy and how important that was for companies that I covered. And we were always trying to guess what they were trying to do. Well, corp dev, one of the main aspects of it is building out the strategy for a company. And so I got to, from the outside looking at it, getting to join on the inside. And the way that my past employer worked is the corporate development team actually wasn't just doing the strategy, but we were involved in the operations. We were involved in investor relations. We were also looking internally for organic things to change within the company, but also looking externally for other opportunities to bring, whether that be another mine or a development project into the company. And so, one of the great things about being in corporate development is you wear so many different hats and you get exposure to so many different things. I can't even, count the number of processes I was in while I was at Hud Bay, where we're looking at different opportunities for the company. But then there's also the plethora of opportunities within the company that I had a chance to work on, like the transition of Snow Lake from being a base metals deposit to a precious metals deposit, and now is considered to be a tier 1 deposit for precious metals. There was also lots of work that we've done, looking regionally in Manitoba for exploration opportunities. And so a lot of the work that I did there right to the very end, Hud Bay is still putting out press releases about some of the work that I did in the background there. Down in Nevada, I was behind the one that acquired Mason Resources, which at the time was about a $19 million US acquisition in total. And now it's valued at $2 billion at the current metal prices. So having the analytical mind and understanding what the value is on different projects is something that's key to Chesapeake. And as I'll get into later, Chesapeake has a great story behind it. We have Mattis, we have the technology, and then we also have the recent discovery of Lucy. And when I was first brought on, we talked about the strategy and looking at what are we doing with the technology and Mattis and how we're going to move Chesapeake forward. And a lot of that comes back to what I learned at Hud Bay and figuring out what's the best pathway forward, given any kind of scenario, depending on the environment, whether the gold price is going up or the gold price is going down, the silver price, whether that's going up or going down. What if the geopolitical situation changes in the country we're working in? All of those questions are things that we would look at and build a strategy that would adapt to different situations.
I'm glad you brought up Mattis and Lucy. We'll get back to those in a second.
Okay.
I did want to zoom in on Chesapeake now, and I know during a previous conversation that we were both part of, you mentioned that you part of the reason you decided to work at Chesapeake as your next venture was because the team, and particularly your predecessor in your current role, Alan Pangborn. I'd love to hear, just people who weren't part of that conversation, love to hear some of your thinking on why Chesapeake at the time that you moved in.
Yeah, so I actually met Alan when I was at BMO. I covered Silver Standard. He was the COO there. One of my first site visits I went on was to Marigold. They had just acquired it from Goldcorp about a year prior. There was all this talk about how they were going to change it. Some people believe that Goldcorp squeezed that lemon and got all the juice out of it already. But Alan had that eye to see what was still there and what kind of value that he can create. And when I joined that site visit and went to Marigold, over that year, he showed so much efficiency with the operations and how he got the teams to be operating the haul trucks much better. Hot seat transfers at when staff are exchanging. There was the operational aspects when it came to the crushing and the blasting and the placement of material on the heap leach, and then all of the refinery to gold doré, all the work that he did there, the exploration work that happened to find more higher grade areas, going back to areas where the pits were done and re-looking at, all of that was all Alan. And all of the hard work and the way that he ran his teams there. And he went on later to buy CB from Cloud Resources, and he turned that one around as well. And anyone that's been watching the 6 videos knows that Alan's very technical. His technical knowledge is unbelievable. And I had the chance to do those site visits, meet with him at conferences and get to know him very well over those few years I was at BMO, and we continued to be in touch afterwards. And when Alan came to me and asked me to join him to continue the Chesapeake story and get the Chesapeake story out there to the market, to me it wasn't much of a challenge for me to make that decision. The opportunity to work with someone like Alan, in your life, there's a couple of people that, my mentor, back in school, that taught me all about discount cash flows, Larry Smith, right? I had some mentors at Royal Nickel, at Hud Bay, at BMO, and I knew that he was one of those people that I would love to learn from and to work with. And he told me the story about Chesapeake, about the technology, about Mattis, the 19 million ounce gold deposit with another 500 million ounces of silver. We had, at the time, I think it was 25 million in the bank account back then. And so it was a very easy decision for me to move from Hud Bay over to Chesapeake. And the other part about Alan is, he's a real people's person. He's really down to earth. And I'm very fortunate that even with Alan moving on from the role of CEO, that he's still on the board, and I still have continuous, conversations with him, both for the technology and advancing that. But there's still some things that are left over from back when he used to manage the Chesapeake ship, that he's open to share his thoughts and be there as an advisor, like all the members of my board. They have lots of sage advice, given they've been in this industry for more years than me, and they have relationships and experience that help me to continue to guide the ship.
Well, that's great. Yeah, it's good to have a supportive board. Not every CEO can boast that, so it's helpful. But let's get into the projects, because I know there's some people probably listening who are looking for updates, and people who are new to the story are probably interested. So I'll start with just can you provide, or were you able to provide an update on the metallurgical work for the Mattis project?
Yeah. So if everyone goes back and remembers back September, we put out a press release on the columns. You'll see on this chart here. This is the chart back from September. We have the dotted black line there that says initial cider column. That was the original work that Alan did. That proved the concept of the oxidation works at the oxidation technology works in Mattis. And he's been working in the background, testing other criteria, whether that be different crushing sizes, whether that's on off, different concentrates of the alkaline solutions, to find the fastest rate at which to oxidize the Mattis material. And through that process, we found a lot of ways not to do it. And like I said, like I always say, Thomas Edison found a lot of ways not to make a light bulb. And he found one way that the light bulb worked, and he didn't chase after the broken light bulbs. He took it, he made millions of copies of it. He tried to improve on it. And the green lines that you see on that chart is actually our light bulb. So that's where we discovered a faster way of oxidizing the material. And that's important because the faster we can oxidize the material, the faster the material leaves the on-off oxidation pad and is placed on the cyanidation pad, where we start to cyanide leach it and recover the gold. So those green lines, they're key. And we've always said that we put 2 more columns on the back of that. And the whole goal here is we'd run columns out to 60 days, 120 days, 180 days. And on the basis of that, we would have different levels of oxidation. Obviously, more time is more oxidation. And hopefully with the more oxidation, the trend's seen that more oxidation means more recoveries. And so we'll have 3 points on a curve that will show how much oxidation at 60 days, 120 days, and 180 days, and then how much recoveries based on the oxidation that we were able to achieve. And that's really the work that's been happening. I actually had the opportunity to go to the lab and see the columns up on the wall just this past week after I attended a roundup there in Vancouver. And the columns are all there. They're working very hard. And there's signs of them working, and they're moving forward. But it's a slow process, and the time when we're going to give the next update is the time when it's ready. And I know we have certain dates outlined here, and we're looking to achieve those. So that gives you kind of an idea, if you work your way back, what the timing of the next announcement would be. But I could also say when I was there, we were also working on other things, other ways to improve on the light bulb. And so that's always the process that Alan had, and I've continued with that process to find a better light bulb while we're still working on the best light bulb that we have today.
Well, appreciate that. And of course, people who might not be new to the story, or who are new to the story, I know that Chesapeake's not a one project shop. You guys also have a fairly exciting exploration project in Lucy. So in the same vein, can you provide listeners with any more information about that upcoming drilling project? When is it happening? How many meters, etc.?
Yeah. So I'd be happy to share that with you guys. So all of you could go back to the press release. I think it was in October. we released the discovery of Lucy. So just a quick reminder for those out there. Our best hole there was 24 meters of 6 grams gold on the most eastern side of the discovery. And then the most western side of the discovery, we had another 4 grams over another 24 meters. And then in between that, we had a whole bunch of holes that also hit mineralization. Now, this was all hit at surface, all the mineralization in these 9 holes, right from surface. We only touched the surface. We only went about 25 meters below the surface when it goes to the drilling. And so there's a lot of potential both at depth, because we need to figure out which direction it's going underground. You can see that the deposit's east-west trending. So it could be that the mineralization is trending to the north or trending to the south. And, you know, that first drill program was a discovery drill program. The next drill program would be one that we would follow up on this and determine which direction it's heading, get a better idea of what is the continuation of the mineralization at depth. But then also, we haven't tested to the east or the west of the deposit. And so there'd be more work involved in looking at surface, you know, where it's trending to the east and the west. What I learned back in the day when I was in Montana, and even when I was at Royal Nickel, is you don't just go drill, right? You go and you do work on the ground that's cheaper, right? You know, drilling in Mexico is pretty cheap already, but, you know, you still have to go out there and do the work, because I want to have the fewest number of holes where I've missed the deposit, right? And so the work that I'm talking about here is going back and doing mapping. Mapping is a really cheap activity. You just have to walk through the field, find outcrops, and then map them onto a map. The other thing that's quite easy to do is you'd go onto the field and you would take soil samples. So you take a whole bunch of samples, and you take samples from rock, whether that be right into the outcrop, so the rock that's part of the earth, or even rock that's kind of situated on top of the earth that may have came off the outcrop. And so you take samples from that, you send all of that to the lab, and you get assay results back, and then you plot all those onto the grid here, and then you can see, you know, where is the mineralization going when you can't physically see it with your eyes because there's grass or there's some ground above it. Or even in some cases, there could be some rock that's covering it. There's a lot of different things that can happen where you don't see the mineralization at surface, but technically it's still there. It's just under a bit of cover. And so there's techniques there where you can actually discover where it's going. And the final part is geophysics. I'm a big fan of geophysics. And skarns, this is a skarn deposit, usually has some sort of magnetic signature. And so the other plan would be to go back and do a ground mag survey over the property. And that also gives us insight deeper into the ground, where the magnetite is, where the skarn is, where the mineralization possibly is. And that will guide us both with the mapping, understanding the chemistry at the surface, and then finally doing the geophysics will allow us to have better targets going forward. But in the interim, you need all that information, which would be the next sort of, exploration program we want to do. But that would lead us to a much more larger program going thereafter, where we know where the deposit is, and we can continue to explore and define more of the deposit and delineate more of the deposit once we know where to go look. And so the current program, I would say we'd focus more on where we actually have channel sampling that we haven't drilled under. And there's some places to the west where we actually have channel sampling that we haven't drilled under. So that'd be an ideal place to go look. As well as there's a bunch of trench samples that were taken in between, which is another place that we can go look. And the intelligent thing to do would be to drill under those trenches, but take a really thoughtful approach. Drill from the north to the south, and then you get an idea if the mineralization is heading to the north, or you drill from the south to the north, and then the mineralization is heading to the south. And so that's the approach that we're taking. We're taking a very systematic and cautious approach with this first program, but we'll have a lot more knowledge than we did after the discovery exploration program that happened last year.
Awesome. And to wrap up, I always like to wrap up these. Is really just curious, what are you most excited about this year's 2024 at Chesapeake?
Yeah, I am excited about Lucy. I think there's a lot of potential there to make another, big discovery under Randy Rifle's tutelage. He was the one that was behind San Francisco's Alcacel discovery, which was later purchased by Glamis. That's a very exciting prospect for me. And then finally, I think the backdrop of what's happening globally when it comes to the Fed in the US and the central bank in Canada. We have been in a tightening regime for the last few years to curb the inflation that we've all been experiencing. And, it sounds like at this time, it looks like we are at a stage where we've tightened to the point where we can tighten. And we're starting to loosen the inflation has come down, and we've tightened a little too much for the consumers and the people out there, and so that's going to be start lowering interest rates, and that's what's been kind of going out to the market, and both the Fed has been saying that, and as we've seen in the past, every time interest rates go down, gold prices take off. Right, they're inversely correlated, and that also is very exciting for me when we have Mattis with 20 million ounces in the ground, and as the gold price goes up, the value of our gold in the ground goes up, and so our story becomes more and more exciting as the metal price increases. And I think we have this opportune time where a lot of things are converging, both the work we're doing in the lab, the work at Lucy, and then what's happening in the global backdrop. And so I'm very excited to be leading Chesapeake over 2024 and sharing more stories with you, my audience.
Awesome. JP, thank you so much.